Hello and welcome to part 5 of the Mr. Fiscal web series. This is Dr. Kemet and I'll be talking to you about retirement, savings, and investing. First, we have our disclosures and disclaimers. You have seen these. Please read on your own time if you need to. And now down to the meat of our discussion. This part of our series focuses on understanding how to plan for the future and grow your money. It's been widely recognized, as we discussed in our first section, that despite having relatively high income, physicians are typically inadequately prepared for retirement. We'd like to address this discrepancy and give you some tools to start planning and preparing for long-term savings and have a better understanding of how to manage your income once it starts growing. So what's our main goal with long-term planning? We'd all like to build wealth. To do this, we need to have a strategy. And the goal of this presentation is to give you a framework and better understanding of your own wealth strategy. I'd like you to understand how to take advantage of things like compound interest, and we'll learn about which savings options are available to you. But the main bottom line is figuring out how to start early and how to save for the long term. Definitely for residents, that means starting now. So real quick, we're going to go through an example of how saving early and taking advantage of things like compound interest makes a huge impact on outcomes. Let's take two residents. One starts saving at 35, puts in $2,000 a year and invests for 10 years. The total money saved is $20,000. A second resident waits until 45 to start investing, but invests twice as much, $2,000 a year for 20 years. At a typical interest rate of 8% per year on her returns, our first resident earns about $145,000. That's $120,000 on her initial savings by retirement, as compared to our second resident, who, despite investing twice as much, gets a significant amount less. So our procrastinator is only able to double his investment, whereas our first resident is really able to take advantage of the time to investing. So what are we talking about? We're trying to emphasize a few things. First is even if you can't put away much, start saving now. Take advantage of the fact that your money will grow. Compound interest and the reliable growth of the stock market over time are really advantageous for you. This means starting in residency. Your current salary gives you the advantage of a better tax profile, especially for things like Roth investment retirement accounts, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, and other areas for tax advantage. There are lots of things you need to do with the little money that you have, just like we've discussed. There's a lot of competing interests, but one of them needs to be considering your long-term wealth management and retirement preparation. Again, even if it's only $50 a month, investment pays off. So what types of investments should physicians focus on? We want you to understand, again, that importance of starting early, but we need to figure out where to put your money. For the most part, we want to look at a broadly diversified profile. That means not putting all of your money into one stock or investment type, but spreading it out into different areas. And then the other area we want to emphasize is using low or no cost investment funds like index funds. Using age or year targeted retirement accounts can be really helpful as well. And that means choosing a plan that automatically adjusts risk or gains as you age. The other bottom line up front is investment strategies. So don't chase your prior returns. Don't change investment allocation, that means where all of your money is going, unless your goals have changed. Try to stay very broadly diversified. That means not putting every kind of or all of your money into one kind of stock or one kind of investment. Try to stay high risk when you have a long time until you need to withdraw money, and then progressively adjust that risk when you get closer to needing your money. Try to revisit your plans annually to make sure they're meeting your needs and reflecting your income. So some quick definitions. Here's the dense part. I want to start with some terms that may help guide you in your retirement planning. And first is really IRA. These are dedicated accounts, specifically termed individual retirement accounts, that may have tax advantage status, and they can be directed towards risk based on your anticipated time of retirement. Often these are not accessible without any penalties before age 55 or 60. Next, index funds. I'm going to say this a lot. These are often low cost or no cost investment accounts that just follow the natural flow of the stock market. That means they grow over time, usually at about 7 to 9%. They're not actively managed, and that means that you aren't paying someone to monitor the fund. Overall, these have more reliable, stable growth than other funds, and you aren't paying someone 1 to 2% of your earnings over time. This harkens back to that compound interest. Most managed funds will not do any better than index funds over multiple decades, and due to compound interest, keeping that low management fee back in your account builds significantly over time. Liquid. This is something that's pretty straightforward, but liquid refers to how easily you can access your money. Retirement accounts really intend for you to keep your money frozen or not accessible for decades, whereas liquid accounts like your checking account means that you can get your money anytime. Different accounts like CDs, stocks, bonds have varying degrees of liquidity. Risk. So when we talk about risk of different funds or places to keep your money, again, this is pretty straightforward. High risk tends to have bigger outcomes or higher interest returns, but if the stock market tanks, you may have huge losses. We'll talk about how to take advantage of this when we think about individual retirement accounts and picking which ones will adjust over time. The next big word is Roth. You'll see this come up over and over again because it's a huge part of retirement investing. Ultimately, it just designates an account as having specific tax advantages. Roth was the name of a senator who made changes to the tax code in 1997. Many of you will be familiar with this when we think about, where we're going to put money to reduce our tax on the outcome. All right, so TSP, this is your thrift savings plan. It's a government or military only option to put money in when you've maxed out usually a lot of your civilian contributions, but it's also a great retirement account for those who can take advantage of it. Tax advantage is another term I say a lot, and that's because it's so much a part of retirement plan. Figuring out how not to pay extra or unnecessary tax on the money you saved is very important. It gets complicated, but understand that there are some ways to minimize paying taxes on your earnings for income or for growth. And now the numbers. All of these numbers that we talk about when we think about retirement accounts are just referring to where in the tax code or Internal Revenue Code you'll be able to find that statute. So the 401k is just a defined contribution pension account. Basically, your employer helping you save, very similar to a 403b. A 457 is another similar option. And then our 429s and 30s are basically education savings accounts. So we'll go through all of these in a little bit. I want you to start thinking about a lot of those tax issues as we go further, but we'll come back to this once we've discussed some of these different plans. Just understand that there are different tax outcomes based on where you put your money. You don't want to pay more tax when you're in a higher tax income bracket, and focusing on tax advantage options can help you direct your investment and savings. So where do we put our money? When we think about the question and we think about our timing, a lot of where we're going to put money is based on our needs. We want to address specific goals. The less immediate need you have for your money, the less liquid it needs to be. So when we focus on short-term money, we think about liquidity, as in how easily we can access these funds. This is where you want to keep your money when you're having something you want to plan for. So a big purchase, like your television, or something else that you really want money available for. This is also where you're probably most familiar. Checking and savings accounts are the easiest way to access your money. The challenge with these very liquid accounts is that you're not earning interest. So if you're routinely keeping more than $1,000 in your account, consider finding a better way to get some interest back on the money that you're saving and putting aside for access. Some examples of this are money market funds or high interest checking accounts. The term high interest here is basically compared to other checking accounts. The best interest you're going to get is around 1%. This is a good place, again, to keep those funds that are greater than about $1,000, like your emergency fund, as at least you can be earning some interest back on that money as it sits there. So medium-term investing or savings is a little bit more challenging for most of us who don't have an income that can help with this. The majority of your planning is going to be based on your short-term or liquid access, and then your long-term or the money that you're putting away from retirement. Medium-term can be an area to focus if you have really specific goals, like a plan to save up for a business or home and want to earn more aggressive interest than your short-term availability, but can't wait until 55 to access your money. So it's also a good place to put money that you want to max out after you've gotten all of your other investment areas covered. The challenge with most medium-term funds is that you're going to pay some more tax than you would on your long-term investments. The other challenge is you can choose low risk, but try to take advantage of those only after you've maxed out all of your other options. One type of this might be cash value life insurance. A lot of these plans can be tax advantaged, very similar to some of your other areas, and they might be exempt from growth taxes like your Roth or your investment savings accounts. But again, they're kind of an option if you already have all of your other boxes checked. So where we're going to focus the bulk of our interest today is long-term investment. The bottom line here is that you owe it to yourself to take as much risk as possible initially. Rely on compound interest and the natural pace of the stock market to produce advantageous outcomes. There are lots of ways you can do this, and the options unfortunately make this area of finance somewhat intimidating. So as you can see, we talk about our 401ks, our 457s, the IRAs, the TSP, the education strategies, our dedicated retirement accounts. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So first we're going to drill down on our specific numbers. So there's the 401k and the 403b. These are our most common type of what we call deferred compensation or defined contribution pension accounts. All this means is that your employer has taken some responsibility to help you plan for retirement. The big points are there's an $18,000 annual cap, and this must come from your salary from your employer. This money is typically an income deduction, and if you can deduct enough of your salary to go into your 401k, you can sometimes drop into lower tax brackets. You'll also pay less income tax as you'll be earning technically less income in the immediate time period. The downside is that you can't touch it without a penalty until 55, and you'll have to pay taxes on your earnings just like income tax after you start to withdraw. The best part about these accounts are that most of the time there's employer matching available. That means that as you contribute, your employer will match your contributions. If you put $8,000 into this account from your salary annually, your employer often will too. The next area that we're going to talk about is the IRAs. These are elective retirement accounts, and the best version of this is the Roth. I've referenced this before, and all this means is that there's specific tax advantage. Any Roth account is contributed into electively. That means you put money in actively. You pay taxes on the money now, and when you start deducting after age 59, you pay no tax on what's coming out of the account. This means that if you think back to our initial example, with our first resident, you pay no tax on that $120,000 you earned from saving $2,000 per year. The downside are the limits. Only $5,500 can go in per year, and there are income limits. As you can see, the income limits are a pretty big deal, as most of the average physician salaries are over $150,000. But if you open your Roth now with your resident income, you can backdoor into contributing after your income exceeds the defined maximums. So we'll talk a little bit about backdoor Roths. That term is a little bit weird, but the summary is once you have your Roth open and started and your income exceeds what you can use to put into your Roth, you can contribute to your Roth in a different way. All you have to do is open a traditional individual retirement account, which is called a TIRA, and contribute your $5,500, then transfer that into your Roth that already exists. It sounds simple, but this really is all you have to do. The only catch is having your Roth IRA before your income exceeds your ability to contribute, and also making sure none of your money from that traditional IRA account is in there at the end of the year. Another good way to put tax-advantaged money away is the 529 and 530 accounts. These are education savings accounts that vary slightly from state to state, but the bottom line is that they're typically tax-advantaged on both ends. In many states, you'll be allowed to contribute pre-tax money, just like your 401 or 403, but can also withdraw the earnings tax-free like a Roth. The main catch is that they can only be used for education, and you have to designate a beneficiary. Most commonly, this is a child, and they can be transferred to other children, but you can't start this for future children. Another area that many of you are familiar with are the TSPs and 457. This kind of closes out on our additional account types that I've already referenced. The TSPs are just another place to put your money. The bottom line, there's a max contribution of $18,000 per year, and the benefit is either income deduction or pre-tax, like a 401k, or you can choose the Roth style. Again, the Roth means that no taxes are taken out on those earnings. Most military do not make enough to be in the highest income tax brackets, so the 401 versions may be less advantageous than the Roth version. Ultimately, you'll be able to pay less tax on your earnings or pay less income tax. It's really up to you. The 457 is very similar to the 401 and 403 type accounts. It's typically an employer-managed fund, and it's just an additional place or designated account to save for retirement. Most commonly, this is for independent contractors who don't have a designated company for the long term, but it can just be another place for an employer to offer additional retirement savings. In most cases, 401s, 403s, and 457s can be transferred from employer to employer, but read the fine print. Before you start contributing, know whether or not your employer will let you take your retirement savings with you when you transfer jobs. This is becoming less of a problem as most employers are advancing to these transferable 401s, but keep this in mind. If you've maxed out everything else, you've got your 401k, you've got your Roth, you've got your TSP, you're putting money in your education savings plans or cash value life insurance, you may want to start thinking about additional investment options. There are other brokerage accounts out there. Again, the big issue that you might want to think about is how they're managed, how much you might earn on them, and how much tax you're going to have to pay. If you earn outside of these tax-advantaged accounts, a lot of those earnings are going to be subject to what we call capital gains tax, which is pretty high. So a lot of times brokerage accounts give you additional options, additional flexibility, additional places to put your money, but the downside of these is how much you're going to tax on your growth. Additional areas of retirement income can come from pension plans, which are becoming exceedingly rare because of the cost of the employer. They're often great for the employee. Also available are Social Security benefits. But as we know, SSI has the potential to disappear by the time we reach retirement age. So planning on other retirement income strategies is in your best interest. So this wraps up our discussion on retirement savings. To summarize, start early. No matter what, you'll have a good income, but wealth comes from discipline. You've got to start saving over time. You want to make sure to max out on your employer matched contributions is essentially free money. If you've got a 401k that your employer will match, if you put $5,000 or $8,000 or $10,000 into, do it. Focus your investments where you can get the best tax advantage, and make sure that you stay in broad-based and low-cost funds. Try to make sure as well that you focus on goal retirement age accounts, as in ones that risk adjust as you get closer to retirement. Staying really high risk early or for long-term investing, and automatically adjusting to lower risk as you get closer to retirement. Here are my resources. Best of luck to you, and wishing you all well on your journey to financial wellness.